Hi, Lindsay. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the October Parents Coffee. Before we get started, I wanted to give a little shout out to the Cambridge Bears softball team. They are on their way in this dreary weather to the state championship game. So we wish them a lot of luck today. And they were excited to get a great send off with the band and the cheer team today. So good luck to the Bears softball team. We are so excited to have Jeannine Jannot and Jessica Baker with us today to talk about mental health in our schools and how that impacts our children. Before we get started, though, I wanted to highlight both of our platinum sponsors for today's Parent Coffee. We have Extra Tire as a platinum sponsor. And today we're actually very fortunate to have Lindsay Freed give us an overview of Simply Admissions before we get started with Jessica and Jeannine. So Lindsay, I'll turn it over to you and thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. So as you mentioned, I'm Lindsay Freed with Simply Admissions, and we are an educational consulting firm. So we help kids with the college admissions process, everything from putting together a balanced college list, working on essays, major career exploration, managing deadlines, and more. Our goal is to simplify the college admissions process, making it less stressful for both parents and kids. And I'm proud to say that I am one of only 7 certified educational planners in Georgia. There are fewer than 300 certified educational planners total. And that designation means that I've proven my expertise through a rigorous application process and passed a 4-hour board certified assessment. It was the first time I've taken a test in years and definitely reminded me what our students go through when taking the ACT and SAT. But my expertise shows through our students' results as well. Last year, our students were admitted to over 118 different schools in 30 states and 5 countries, receiving $8.2 million in merit aid. This year, we're on track to surpass those numbers as our students have also already gotten into over 21 different schools in 12 states. But while our senior class is currently full, we do still have openings for the class of 2023 and beyond. So if you're interested in learning more about our services or would like to schedule a complimentary consultation, please visit our website, simplyadmissions.com. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. That sounds awesome. And hopefully you guys will go check out her website and her services. And thank you for being a Platinum sponsor. We really appreciate that. In a minute, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and Jeannine. But as a reminder, if you have questions for our presenters, you can feel free to type it in the chat. And we could ask it for you. You can also raise your hand by clicking the reaction button at the bottom bar of your screen. If you're on a computer, you can also click raise your hand. You can give reactions like a thumbs up or applause to let Jeannine and Jessica know that you appreciate them and their wisdom. We've muted everyone on the call to begin with, but if you want to ask a question, you can simply unmute yourself by pressing the microphone button on the bottom of the screen. We did get a lot of great questions coming from the posts on the Bears Den, so Jessica and Jeannine both have those and they'll speak about those, but if you do have other questions, feel free to either unmute yourself and ask, or you can, if you're not comfortable with asking in this setting, you can always send me a personal chat here as well, and I can ask it for you, or Krista can ask it. And just as a reminder, all the video calls are recorded. They will be available later on the PTSA website for replay. So you can watch it again at a later time if you would like to. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica and Jeannine. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Leanne. I'm going to just jump in. Jeannine and I didn't really decide who was going to go first, so I'm just going to. For those of you who know me, I jump into things all the time. So here I am, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I also, when I talk, like to walk and move. So bear with me, because sitting still is not my preferred method. Although it is the method that many of us have had to shift to in therapy for the last year and a half. And a lot of us have had to shift to in your other jobs and workplaces. So I get that. What Jeannine and I discussed is we both, I think, Jeannine, you have a couple of slides also. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to try to share the slides. I'm not making any promises. So we'll see if it works or if I have permission even to share my screen. Let's see. Okay. You probably don't need to see all of that. Yeah, I've got part of it going. Now if I can get it so that it's actually showing just the slides and not everything. It's been a minute since I've had, there we go. Okay, so I think that should be right. So just to give you the way I've broken this down is I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background of who I am, why I've been asked to come and speak, and then just give you a little bit of what I'm seeing in my practice, what I'm hearing from parents, and kind of tidbits of advice. As Leanne said before, when we put it out to the Bears Den, people sent in some questions. I would imagine that we could talk and ask just questions for 10 hours, not 1 hour. So I'm going to try to keep my comments brief, but I'm happy to expand on anything further on if people have questions or want to get in touch with me. I just put in my chat my email address. I'm also happy to give out my cell phone number. Just so if there are questions that you don't want to ask now, or you do want to, follow up on, that information is there. I know when Jeannine and I met just to chat about this, we got so excited and started talking that we could have talked for hours just ourselves about what we're seeing and the concerns that we have. I think both within our practices and within the community, I think just sort of as a whole. So just to give you a little bit of background, I'm a clinical psychologist and the mother of 4. I have one child here in elementary, one in middle, one in high school, and one who just graduated. So I feel like I kind of cover the spectrum right now for the like time continuum and what I'm hearing in different places. Some of what I share today will be information that I hear not only in session, but in carpools when I'm driving kids around and I'm just listening to them and the things that are concerning them. So I think that my role as a member of the community definitely impacts the work I do as a therapist. So I got my master's from UGA and my PhD from the University of Florida. And my secret for you is nobody cares. Doesn't matter. And I want you to hear that, because especially right now, that's a big deal. Like, my degrees mean more than they used to, but it is not, at the end of the day, what made a difference for me. If you want to know what changed my life, it's that little tiny school at the top that nobody's ever heard of. So I say that, and we can talk more about it later, to just remind you that sometimes the path less traveled is a great one. And the things that we think are best for our children may not be. So just remember that at the end of the day, nobody ever asked me what my GPA was. Nobody asked, not even when I got my next job. It's not that important, but there's so much pressure on our kids and the messaging they're getting. So again, we can go into that a little bit later. In addition to, so I'm in private practice here in Milton, but I've also worked in college counseling centers, universities as a professor. I've worked in a residential treatment center, and the last few years I've been working on training other people to work with eating disorders, because that is my specialty. I see mostly people with eating disorders, addiction, and mood disorders. And if you had asked me 5-10 years ago what my client base would look like and would they be teenagers, I would have said absolutely not. And that's for two reasons. One, I didn't specialize in children, but I specialized in these areas. But two, as a parent, my work schedule has been that I only see clients during the day when my kids are in school. So I never got to see kids that were in school. But now kids are being taken out of school all the time to see therapists and to see psychiatrists and to see doctors and to see trainers and sports people and all kinds of things. And I'm kind of torn in how I feel about that, because on the one hand, I think good, maybe we are finally giving mental health the attention that it deserves. And on the other hand, I'm really worried, because it means maybe the severity of the mental health has become so intense that we're having to pull our children out of school to get them the kind of support that they need. So it's been an interesting journey in my private practice to see the switch. And I'd like to share with you today just a little bit about what some of my clients say, so you can hear their voices and understand what they're looking for. But hopefully what I hope that Jeannine and I can do today is just open up a conversation in our community about what we're seeing, what we'd like to see, how we can all help each other, because it's not just our kids who are suffering, it's everybody. And that's not just pandemic related, but it certainly has been intensified by the pandemic. So who am I seeing is the first thing I'm going to talk to you a little bit about. As I said, right now I'm seeing 85% young adults. That's mostly kids who are in high school. Occasionally I will see kids that are younger, but it's not my specialty area. So I would rather refer to somebody who's better suited for that. The main complaint I see from the clients, from the kids when they walk in the door, they don't necessarily walk in and say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. The ones who come in for eating disorders never admit that that's why they're there. And what they say to me is, I'm exhausted. I'm fighting with my friends. I can't keep up with my classes. I haven't slept in a week. I have these college applications and I'm so stressed out about them. And how do I know what school to apply to? Or what are my friends going to think if I don't get into UGA? What are my parents going to think if I don't get into Florida? What are my friends going to think if I, everybody is so concerned about everything that's going on. But at the end of the day, what I feel like is that these kids are just running and running and running, and they never feel like they're landing where they want to be. And sometimes they don't even know why they want to be where it is they think they're headed. And slowing them down and helping them understand what their own goals are. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But I do want to read just a couple of quotes that I got from clients. Now, some of these are clients that I have seen in high school, in elementary school, and some who've gone off to college. But so when we talk about how young and how prevalent it is, I think at the high school level and at Cambridge, we're all thinking, well, these kids are in high school, they're getting ready to go to college. This is what they should be thinking about. This is from at the time, 7-year-old from one of the elementary schools. And it says, "I know I'm dumb, Dr. Baker, because all the smart kids are in tag. Do you think there's a class I could take that would get me in?" It broke my heart to hear that from this kid, because they already know and they're already tracked from such an early place. And sometimes those kids that are tracked and accelerated early hit this critical tipping point that Jeannine can talk so beautifully about. If you haven't read her book, you really should. Where they just basically, the rigor tipping point is too much for them. And they've been pushed ahead so far, so fast that it's overwhelming. Then I have another one. It's a little bit longer, but bear with me. "I always felt like there was such a high or even unrealistic expectation set. I would push myself to such extremes that when it came to being the perfect student or building the perfect resume, that at one point I was not even able to enjoy the experiences with my friends or family that most teenagers should get to experience. I also think that the pressures at Cambridge and the community I grew up in led me to unhealthily compare myself. I vividly remember coming home in tears and questioning myself because I was not able to balance playing a varsity sport, being involved in extracurriculars, having a job, and making a 4.0 GPA in 4 AP classes. I thought that because I knew another student who could manage to make straight A's and take more AP classes than I did, I was just not going to be successful or get accepted by the college I wanted to end up at. These expectations kept me up at night, worrying about my future or studying for hours on end, and they rarely taught me to enjoy the things that are sometimes the most memorable things that happen in your high school experience." That came from a young woman who I started seeing when she was a sophomore, and she was anorexic and like on the brink of being hospitalized, and she could not engage with the people around her because she was so worried about not being enough. And she turned to managing her emotional stress around that with her eating disorder. And the last one I want to bring up, which is a little more pandemic related, came from someone at the end of last year. She said, "I can't go back to school. I will fail if I have to take classes in person. It's better this way. Maybe I'll even get into UGA. It's always been my dream, or at least my mom's. I've been cheating all year. I just can't go back." And she decided to stay at home because she could manage to get through the classes, because at the end of the day, the grade was way more important to her than her relationships or learning in the school or being able to be engaged in the things going on. And it's really hard to help these kids see that at the end of the day, the grade is not the most important thing. Okay, what am I hearing from parents? I hear from parents, and Jeannine and I mentioned this the other day, I have never had as many calls or stops in the grocery store or chats on the, basketball court or on the green about people's concerns about their kids, things that they're seeing. Do you know anyone who could help? I'm really worried about this. It's happening everywhere. And it's, again, there's a part of me that thinks, good, people are not as afraid to ask for some mental health help. They know what I do. They're coming to me. Part of me is glad for that. I'm also so overwhelmed. I couldn't take another patient if I tried to. I know that's true for many of my colleagues. Everyone is overwhelmed with this work right now. And we need to find ways that we can help these kids from the ground up, because if we don't change our culture some, we are going to continue to perpetuate this kind of stress and anxiety in the kids. The other thing I've seen personally in my work is anxiety being the predominant factor. Kids who were not so anxious before, anxiety is extreme. kids who were depressed are having panic attacks. And I think a lot of that comes from just, we've been living through 18 months of unknown. We all don't know, I mean, I had just the other day, I had 4 kids in the back of the car who were like, no, we don't have to wear masks this week. I just saw something that said we don't have to wear masks. No, I think you still do have to wear. Every day, everything's changing, right? That seems very small and very insignificant, but so much of their lives have been permeated by things changing all the time, every day, how they're learning, what they're allowed to recover, what they're not allowed to recover. It's more than they can manage very well. And I just think that that's what a lot of the parents are coming to me with. Unfortunately, I'm also getting a lot of parents coming to me with just do whatever you need to do to make them successful in this crazy setup we already have set up. I have one parent who has Life 360, no judgment, do whatever you need to do, but she tracks her because she knows that her daughter goes to buy food. And so she tracks the restaurants that she's going to, or if she's going to Publix. And then when the kid comes home, she gets slammed about where she's been. And she said to me the other day, you know what? I finally figured it out. I'm eating at my mom. And I thought, well, yeah, there it is, right? So there's so much pressure and so much going on, and we're tracking them in so many ways. That I think it'd be better if we could just have some conversations with them. But most of the parents I talk to are results driven, and the result is not necessarily well-being. The result is that they're turning in their work and that they're getting good grades. And that's not my specialty. So what can we do? And this is the last slide I'm going to cover is, and what I really think is asking questions and listening for the answers. Jeannine and I talked a little bit about this the other day, like, what are your fears? What is it that you're worried about? So I use Infinite Campus as an example, because I don't think anyone on this call grew up in a time when their parents had 24/7 access to their grades, right? So I was talking to a kid the other day who said, same kid actually who drives around, said, I don't want to go home because I know that as soon as I see the grade, my parent has seen it as well. And I know it's going to be an issue when I get home. And that's whether the grade is good or bad. There is constant dialogue around little markers of success. And it's the kids don't get to own their grades because the parents are all over them. And when I talk to parents about it and I say, what would happen if you just stopped looking at it? They say, well, they'll not turn their work in. They'll never do it. And I said, part of the problem is that's the message that you're sending them, is that they are not capable of doing it without your involvement. So now, do I think that there's a happy balance there? There's a medium. We got to find out what kind of support and challenge our kids need. Absolutely. But just pay attention to what messages you're sending to your own kids. What are your goals, your own and your child's, for success? What does success look like? What are your expectations in your family? We have to start in the smaller center, because we know that the culture of crazy pressure and achievement is what our kids are growing up in. What are we telling them at home? What is okay at home? What is enough? What is good enough? What is balance? And communicating that with them constantly, because that is tremendously important. And then the last thing is just in terms of communication, remember that your kids are always listening, and that do as I say and not as I do. I have clients with eating disorders whose parents constantly talk about food and body image and being at the gym and whether they're good or bad. And they say to me, no, but I never say that to so-and-so. Do you think they're not listening? Because I promise they are. And they're listening to all of it. So even if you say, it's okay with me if you get B's, if you try really hard, but then they hear you talking to your friend about, is so-and-so taking AP and are they doing this? And they hear it and they feel it all over. So I think we need to look at ourselves, and we need to talk to our kids and do the best we can to support them, while also being aware of everything that they're going through right now and that we're all working on. And, you know, one of the questions that I saw, and we may get to covering them later, but just had to do with how do we support the parents too? Because the reality is we are all struggling. This pandemic has been real and is still real. And regardless of where you fall politically and how all of that is impacting you, because that's impacting our kids too. There is strife and craziness in our world right now at a level that has not been before. And that conflict goes on in their day-to-day lives. So I think just being really conscious and making sure that you are setting a good example and role modeling the balance and everything else those would be sort of my top recommendations. I will stop sharing. All right.
Great. Thank you, Jessica.
Yep.
Jeannine, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Oops, there we go. Oops, did not mean to do that. Okay, so thank you, Jessica, for that. And thank you for saying like everything, because I agree with absolutely everything you just said. And I'm seeing so much of the same. So I've done Cambridge parent talks for, I think every year since the second year the school opened, which I think was the first year we started doing this. So I've been doing this a while. And so many of you on here may be familiar with me and familiar with my, let's call it a soapbox, or we could call it my book. I don't know. But you know how I feel about the achievement culture and, you know, our struggling kids. So I'm not going to go too deep into any of that because I really just want to say, what am I seeing now? What's changed, you know, over the last year and a half in particular, and what I really kind of, to Jessica's point, how we as parents can maybe, excuse me, I've got a throat issue today, how we as parents can maybe show up a little bit differently for our kids and control what we can control around all this craziness. So I'm really going to talk more about the state of student and families as I see it from my academic coaching side of things. If you're not familiar with my soapbox, I think I have 24 or more podcasts on my website right now that you could get a real earful if you want to go there and check that out. So overall, the thing I'm seeing the most this year, and this really, you know, goes back even to last year, but the number one complaint I get from students and parents, and I'm not just seeing kids around here in North Fulton. I see kids all around the Atlanta area and even as far away as San Francisco. So I'm talking, you know, through my interviews and stuff, I'm talking with parents and educators from around the country and Canada, and hearing from students from across the country as well. So I feel like, you know, I always worried, was it just here? But this is pretty pervasive what's going on. And the number one concern is being overwhelmed. So that just out the gate, a student will tell me, I'm sinking, I'm overwhelmed. And with that comes that sense of kind of paralysis, just getting stuck. And that's what parents are telling me too, that, you know, I just see them being so overwhelmed that they're just not doing anything. So, and tied with that is motivation. So when I really start, you know, talking to students about, so, you know, why are we overwhelmed? And one of the concerns I have is I'm not motivated. And what's really interesting about the motivation piece is it's different than it's been in the past, because before the pandemic, students would come to me when they'd hit that rigor tipping point and they were kind of paralyzed around what to do next. They would always tell me, I care. I care. I just don't know what to do or how to do it. And as of around last semester, or the last semester of last year, what I was hearing from students across the board was, I don't care. I used to care. I know I should care. I do not care. And that was a significant change. And so that put me as an academic coach in a much different position, because in the past, a student who cares, who is motivated to figure out what to do next, can take the skills and strategies and the information I can provide as a coach and do something with it and turn things around. And that's what typically would happen. Now I'm seeing so many students, probably the majority, if not maybe all of them at this point, are seeing me. They're seeing a therapist, and I'm doing more work that kind of cuddles up to that therapy side of things than I am the coaching side of things, because you cannot tell a person who is in that very, very low motivation state, not in a very good mental space to be able to execute skills and strategies. Here's what you need to do. They'll understand it, but that doesn't mean they're going to be able to actually follow through and do it. So mental health issues, as Jessica's brilliantly pointed out, a big problem. And I'm also seeing more family conflict, just as a result of communications breaking down, especially when we've got so many more kids struggling now than ever before. And there's a disconnect between what we thought this school year was going to be like and what this school year is actually like. So let me get into a little bit more about, let me try and move that. There we go. So I can see a little bit more about what I'm seeing with students, what I'm seeing with parents, and I'll spend the most time on like what we can do. So just quickly, the student side of things is nothing new, really. They're taking too much and inappropriate rigor, which just means, it doesn't mean they can't handle like the individual like AP course or whatever it is. The problem is they're kind of missing out on that that balance. So what I see is the kids are opting to take that extra AP, even if it's in a class they don't like, you know, a subject area that's not their favorite, because they quote unquote should, or they quote unquote need to. And what they will give up is sleep most often. So, you know, some of these kids are getting like 4 hours of sleep a night, sometimes less than that, which is bad. So they're, what I'm trying to encourage students to do is when they start to plan, and we're getting close to that time where we'll be planning for next year, and the college students are already doing that right now, getting their schedules, or next semester for our college students, figuring out a little bit better balance between sleep, you know, what they need socially and for downtime and for hobbies, for job or work, movement. You know, they can't be sitting at their desks all the time doing homework. And then, you know, how much is a reasonable amount of time to be spending on academics? And does that work with the kinds of courses they're setting themselves up to take? Among our real high achievers, there's a hyper competitiveness, and I see a lot of perfectionism playing a role there. Again, the same group of students are really struggling with having very, very high expectations for themselves. So I know I talk to a lot of parents who say, it's not me, I'm setting the expectation here. Their personal expectation is way up there. And sometimes that comes from that hyper competitiveness and just that personality trait of tending to be a little bit more perfectionistic. High rates of cheating and low levels of learning, certainly since the pandemic, and you know, virtual school made this much easier, a wider problem than it had been before. And it was a big problem before. It really just became a means to an end of checking boxes last year. And this partly, I think, explains why this year is such a struggle for so many students. Again, we kind of had high hopes. We're going back. Everybody's in school. It's going to be great. It's going to be almost normal school year. It's been anything but, and I'm not even in the school system, and I know that. My youngest graduated last year, but I'm definitely getting the message. This is not a normal school year, not only here, but everywhere. And part of that is, I swear to you, I think our kids have forgotten how to be a student and have forgotten how to learn. I mean, not literally, but to some extent, last year really changed a lot of stuff for them. And so there are social issues. There's all this built-in anxiety. There's this lack of confidence. There are just so many things that were not part of the package pre-pandemic that these kids brought back with them. And the schools in general have kind of doubled down on learning loss. Like, we got to be back to normal. We've got to get these kids caught up. And that is backfiring, I think, tremendously, because again, we can't do this if their mental state is not in a place to learn. If their brains are not open to learning, which by and large, what I'm seeing is they're certainly not optimized for learning right now for the amount of other stuff that's going on. Just like Jessica said, from a mental health perspective, I'm seeing kids who have anxiety, depression, panic attacks, eating disorders, OCD, substance use disorder. Those are much more prevalent now than I've ever seen before. A lot of the students I'm working with, if not all of them, have that fixed mindset. They're really backing away from challenges. They're really apprehensive to ask for help. They're kind of in that paralyzed state. Some students, most students were burned out last year from being kind of, overcommitted, overscheduled, overwhelmed with the whole virtual situation. Again, any students who doubled down this year with the expectation you're going to make up for lost time, burnout is a huge issue there. The circle at the top about motivation, those are the three things that I see often that's impacting motivation the most. Lack of control. So they don't feel like they have a lot of control over their lives, and learned helplessness comes out of that sense of, well, I guess I can't handle it. As Jessica mentioned, I need somebody else to do this for me. Or I'm not even going to try. And there's a lot of resignation that kind of comes with that. Competency being, feeling like that we have enough competency to tackle tasks given to us. That's another piece of motivation. And, a lot of our kids are lacking skills and confidence, and they don't feel like they're competent to handle things. And then the last piece of motivation is connection. And when our kids feel disengaged, disinterested, and disillusioned by learning, that's another piece that's kind of feeding this low motivation cycle. Oops, over here, show you what I'm seeing with parents really quick, or what I'm hearing. Again, the most common complaint I have from parents is, my kid's not motivated anymore. They don't seem to care. And I do hear what Jessica hears as well, that there's that need, out of concern for, let's just fix this problem. Let's get that work handed in. And particularly in my field, helping kids with the academics, that is certainly success. Is the kid caught up? Is the kid doing better on tests? And certainly that is my goal, to help with all those things. But again, I'm having to spend double, triple the amount of time and number of sessions on students than I ever had to before, because I can't just jump in and help them make those changes immediately. They need that help in their thinking first, to be able to be motivated to do that. So, we're parenting from a place of fear. Oftentimes it comes from a place of love, and everything we're doing is very well intentioned, but we do, especially in communities like this, we do have an unhealthy focus on achievement. And I don't, the checking of the portal, it's a habit, I think, that we get into. And I think that has to be a conscious choice if that's something we really want to be doing. And so I would kind of challenge all parents to maybe think about at least curbing that habit, so that maybe you check it together with your child, maybe every Sunday. Keep in mind the reason we're doing all this stuff, that we have unrealistically high standards for our kids sometimes, and we're overly invested in their success, and we're exerting a lot of control, a lot of micromanaging going on. A lot of the reason we're doing that is because we're in the achievement culture. And again, if you want my soapbox on the achievement culture, just listen to one or two of my most recent podcasts, and you'll hear plenty about that. But I think we're responding to what we think the expectations are, and we're responding to what we think the risks are. So, again, well-intentioned, and this is all very hard to do, but none of it is really helping our kids right now. It is backfiring. It is backfiring badly. One other thing I've noticed, I don't think I heard Jessica mention this, is a lot of parents are starting to game the system, actually seeking out evaluations for their kids for like a diagnosis of ADHD or something like that, to get extra time on the ACT or SAT tests, or get a 504 plan. And again, well-intentioned, but driven by something that is a bit beyond our control right now, which is this achievement culture. Oh, and just from a mental health perspective, I think there's a lot of issues that we as parents are experiencing that parallels what's going on in our kids too. So real quickly, what do we do? So, or at least what do I tell parents to do? The very first thing I'm asking parents to do, especially this year, is prioritize your relationship with your child over academics. That should be the thing. For me, success would be my child getting out of high school and going off to college, and our relationship being intact and strong. And if we prioritize academics, that's at risk. So we prioritize our relationships by showing up with unconditional love and warmth and support. And that is actually very protective for our children. So if we are trying to help them manage big emotions, mental illness, any of those things, we are most protecting our child in that space when we are showing up in that loving way. And the second thing I think is really important is we have to know what we do and what we do not control as parents, because I start to see that friction in the relationships when the parent is trying to control stuff that really should be within the child's control. And we've been with that micromanaging piece. So some very specific action steps we can take. We can stop helping so much, even though it's so well-intentioned. When we micromanage our kids, it's leading to negative outcomes: low self-esteem, low motivation, resentment, dependency, entitlement, failure to thrive when these kids go off after graduation, and general poor mental well-being. How we can start to make, we don't have to stop helping altogether, but be more aware of when we're jumping in, when our kids don't need our help, and when they don't necessarily even want our help. So we need to give them age-appropriate responsibilities, regardless of how stressed out, how busy they are. That is part of like learning how to manage that. That's part of coping. Natural consequences for when things go wrong. and to help them develop their competencies, which is going to help build that resilience that I know so many of you are interested in, feeling like, how do we make our kids more resilient? That needs to come organically. They're going to be watching us. And that's the kind of thing that we can show them through what we do, how to be more resilient. Real quickly, listening to our kids, just as Jessica mentioned, listen with empathy, not to judge them or defend yourself. Get out of your 40, 50 something year old brain and get into their 14, 15, 16-year-old brain and understand where they're coming from. Give them your full attention. Keep those conversations open-ended and revisit them often. They shouldn't just be a one-off thing, because we will slip into old habits so quick if we don't continue the conversations. If you have a kid who won't talk, doing an activity with them where it's sort of your parallel. Oftentimes a kid will start talking then, sometimes at night before bed, they'll be more engaged to talk, and even writing. So sending notes back and forth or texting might work for your child. Please, 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 I'm begging you, redefine success in your family. That is the only control we have as parents in fighting back on the achievement culture. That's a big, huge ask to get the achievement culture to really do some big fundamental shifts by the time our kids get out of school, right? What we can do in our own family is, what does success look like for us and our kid? What are reasonable expectations for you, my kid? Normalize mistakes. Understand and talk about the college does not have to be the goal for every kid. There are wonderful things around gap experiences. Trade schools are an excellent opportunity, and there's a huge job market for those kinds of jobs. The military is a great option. Apprenticeship, doing an alternative path to a four-year college by taking a 2-year associate's degree first. There are all kinds of ways our kids are going to be successful. And if we try to fit them in that, you need to go to the UGA box, that is probably not going to work out for the majority of us. And finally, I just, please, I know many people are, but seek help when you need it for you or your child. And, look at the school, your primary care physician, ask friends or trusted people in your life for referrals. You can search in Psychology Today by region or specialty, and community resources, at your place of worship, or even the city of Milton has a mental wellness website. So that's kind of what I've been seeing. And I would just, I hope I don't come across too harsh and make you feel like I'm putting a lot of this on parents, but I really do feel like we have an opportunity to really turn things around for our own individual kids if we kind of just step back and think about what we're controlling here. So, again, I know we love our kids and we're all doing this very well intentioned, but that's where I see where we do our best work for our kids. Let me. There's the button. I couldn't find it.
All right. Thank you so much. We have like about 15 minutes left, and both of you presented such wonderful information, and I felt a lot of that. Having 3 girls, definitely struggle with expectations and wanting the best, but yet trying to step away and let them figure things out. But I wanted to open it up for questions to see if anyone had any questions for Jessica or Jeannine. And you can take yourself off of mute to ask a question. If you don't want to ask a question, you can type it to me in chat and I will ask it for you.
I'm going to ask a question if that's okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, so I have a child who is a freshman. One of the biggest challenges, and in the interest of trying to protect privacy, I'm just going to use neutral pronouns, but one of the biggest challenges they are facing is the fact that their relationships from middle school have not continued into high school. And they are really struggling to find their place, find their people. The few friends they have made, in my opinion, are not really their people, but they're the only ones who are really reaching out or giving opportunities to have a friendship. And that's hard as a parent when there's been these close-knit relationships for years and years that have now just disintegrated, and my child is so lonely. Just wondering if you guys have any advice for how to help them navigate that landscape as a freshman.
I think you're bringing up a great point. That's, I think your child's not alone in this situation. And part of it is developmentally, the task in middle school, at middle school age, is to be social, to connect with peers, to pull away from parents. And the opposite happened to so many of our children who fall in that range. And that was a huge struggle. And then to get your footing back when you then transfer into a new school, new expectations, is just a very overwhelming thing to add on top of, you're also in high school and doing that. So Jessica, do you have some suggestions for how that student would?
Yeah, I do. I think partly the other thing that I would just raise is that it is pretty common. It's not all that unusual to see some real shifting of friend groups in high school. And especially, I know, like, I don't want to blame everything on the pandemic. However, it has impacted the way these kids are interacting with each other in so many ways, their comfort level in doing so, and who they've remained in contact with during the isolation and the other parts of this kind of strange 18 months we've had. I think that one of the other things that I see pretty consistently with the freshman into sophomore is that kids start making different choices in high school. Maybe there are more options, maybe there's more going on, maybe it's all a new environment. Each kid is a little bit different, but sometimes the people who have been your best friends are no longer doing the same things that you are doing or want to be doing. And I know that has created a lot of strife for some of the kids I've been seeing. And I don't know if that's happening with your child or not. I think loneliness and isolation is one of the things I deal with very consistently with my clients. And they're trying to figure out, what is it that I did? What did I not do? What am I doing wrong? And I think, again, listening to them about what's happening and not fixing it. I think as a parent, right, the rush is sort of to like solve it, to fix it, to do all of those things. I think knowing that if you believe in them and you support them and you tell them that as long as they're choosing the people that they want to be with, that those relationships will grow, that there's some truth in that, but it doesn't take the pain out of what you're probably experiencing just watching them in pain, which I think is the harder thing as the parent. The other thing I would say is to encourage your child to get involved in things that they really truly enjoy, not just things you're signing off on, not just resume builders, whatever, but things they really like, because then you find that you are with other people who have similar interests, and it is easier to develop those relationships organically, even if they are new.
Well, can I ask sort of a follow-up question to that? This is a little bit different, but this is our oldest child. We've got a younger as well, but we're also trying to navigate, okay, how much of the teen moodiness or whatever, how much of this is teenage garbage and how much of this is mental health? And I feel like there's such a fine line there. We're currently in some family therapy for what we suspect are some legit mental health things, but we feel like we're constantly walking this tightrope of, are we about to, like, we're all going over the edge here. And how much of this do we permit? And how much of this do we need to clamp down on for everybody's sanity? And I'm sure that's a common situation too. We limit, there is no social media in our home because we're trying to cut out as much of the influence as we can, but it's still pervasive.
Yeah. I think that's a great follow-up. And I think, to be honest with you, like, the reason that we don't diagnose teenagers with personality disorders, like, you're not technically allowed to, is because they would all have one. Like,
Right.
and I'm not just being facetious. That's just true. If I went through like the checklist of criteria for a personality disorder, I could put like all of my children into one in their teen years. It's just, it is partly developmental task, like Jeannine said, and some of it is that pushback. The other thing that happens in high school is they do really want to push away. They do want more independence. They are trying to, and they get grumpy and they get sassy and they get back up in your face. I would say, and I don't know if this is true for everybody, but I can tell you that it was true in my house. Our rules got way more lax during the pandemic because I wanted to do something that made people feel better, right? That's just my own draw. Like, my kids did not play video games, right? I was the anti-video game mom. And then I realized that my boys were not communicating with anybody ever because boys didn't text each other and they didn't call each other, but they talked while they played these games for hours on end. And so we made new rules and we let them play games. I think that what I have seen a lot of is parents kind of needing to come back in, pull the boundaries back in a little bit. You are going to school, your expectations are the same. Our kids need us to put boundaries in place. They push them because they want to feel them. They need to know that they're there. So I would say it's important to have your clear expectations, know what they are. It seems like you're already aware that there could be something else going on, which is great. You're not trying to do that on your own. But my concern is for some parents who are so afraid that something will go badly because their child does have some mental health issues, that their rules fall away altogether and it makes it worse, not better. Jeannine, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to add about that.
No, I think that's beautiful.
So I would say hold your line. That's the bottom line to it. I think it's important. And I think, going back, there was a question in the Bears Den earlier about drinking and people providing it. And I think, and it goes back to what Jeannine said, we have to start the conversations in our own houses with our own understanding of what the expectations are. And I think we are all doing the best we can out of love for our children, but we need to be very honest about what's happening. And I think one of the things that I bump into a lot with people is denial that their child could possibly be involved in any of these risky behaviors. And I think you're better off assuming that they're going to try it and have an honest conversation with them about it. The question in the chat had to do more with like, how do I handle this? I have practice conversations with my kids ahead of time about how are you going to handle a situation if this is presented to you and it is not what you want to do. Go into a situation with a decision already made, because if your mind is open, then it's easier to sway you. So I think making sure those conversations are happening, knowing what the expectations are and what the boundaries are, and keep having them. You don't have that conversation one time. You have to keep having it because they keep changing and what they're exposed to changes, and their friends are doing different things and they're confused and they don't know where to go or what to do. And they need us as guardrails more than as snowplows.
I agree so much with that. And just, like around the drinking issue, I think it's important to remember that as parents, our number one thing is we love our kids. We do that. But our number one priority is to keep them safe. So there are going to be rules and boundaries around safety. So when you have these conversations, particularly about high risk behaviors, the discussion is, where are those boundaries around safety? This is a safety issue. So you may want to experiment with drinking, and you may acknowledge that that's going to happen or has happened with your child. But then to say drinking, getting in the car, either yourself driving or somebody else impaired driving, that's a no-go. That's a safety issue, and that is not okay. And there will be X, Y, and Z consequence if that happens. And so to be really clear, and then instead of just being, and that's our rule, which it is, you still want to have that conversation about why it's a safety, why it falls under that rubric of this is a safety concern. And if you talk through that with your kid, they're going to be able to, like, so what would happen if, you got behind the wheel and you were impaired and this happened, and have them work out with you, the consequences or potential consequences of breaking that safety rule, so that they may not like the rule. They may not like, I can't go to that party because there's going to be alcohol there. They may be really upset at you, but they're going to understand a lot more, and the blowback isn't going to be as intense.
And just to piggyback on that, and in terms of sort of the role play conversations I have, the other thing that we do, and I think probably a lot of people may have something like this set up, but we have like I don't have a better term for it, like a safety emoji. There is an emoji that if a certain child sends me, it means come and get me out of where I am. If my child calls and asks certain things that they know I would say yes to, I know it's because they need me to say no. Have those conversations with your kids. I also tell my kids all the time, throw me under the bus. I don't care if your friends don't like me, if they think I'm the mean mom, if you are at a party and everybody's drinking, if you say to them, my mother will kill me. My mother is a therapist and she drug tests me. Like, I tell them all kinds of crazy things. Same thing with coaches, same things with anybody who they can use from sort of the authority figure that gives them the freedom to make those choices and feel like they can kind of save face, because a lot of it developmentally at this age is about, it's about friend groups. It's about popularity as much as we don't want it to be. It's about being cool and being accepted. And they are afraid and they do things because they want to be accepted. So the more things we can do to support them in that way, which provides some of that safety that Jeannine's talking about, but also helps them save face, I think is also really important for those kids who are in those situations at the time.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? I know it's the top of the hour, but if you have anything else that you'd like to ask before we close out today's session, feel free to do that. So I'll open it up.
Leanne, there's one in the chat.
Okay, let me see. Krista, do you see that? Hold on.
Yeah. So
if you don't mind reading it, thank you.
Yeah, Dawn says, back to achievement culture. I feel like many of us live in this achievement culture and got here by our own achievement. So even when we want to walk it back for our kids in terms of what they're hearing from us, maybe they're seeing something different. I'm trying to be very conscious about saying out loud the ways I'm attempting to focus on self-care, for example, even when it's hard, trying to say out loud when I'm refusing to let perfect get in the way of good enough. I think the only way to counteract everything they see and feel outside of our home is to lay it on heavy with how we define success. This is definitely a huge growth opportunity our family is trying to take advantage of. It's hard. Okay, so that wasn't a question, but that's a really great comment. We're obviously in a really high achievement area. And, that can be, that's just the culture that we're living in. And I think you're right, Dawn. I think it's good to really make sure that we're talking things out loud so that kids hear other versions of what success is, being healthy and happy. So if you guys have anything to add to that, that's great. That would be helpful.
Dawn, I think that that's fantastic. And I think it's way easier said than done to point out those times and to show the times. Showing our kids when we're not perfect is important too. Showing them that that's part of what's normal, showing them that things are hard. During the pandemic, I had that conversation with a lot of families, especially with everybody at home at the same time. We had 6 people all online at the same time. It was a disaster in this house. And I, every day, started to walk my dogs for like an hour, and literally people all over Milton were like, "Oh, I saw you walking your dogs." I was like, "Yes, because I have to get out or I might kill somebody." They're like, "But you're a therapist." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm a therapist. I know that I have to get out. I know that it's best to have some place." The other thing that happens in my house is I exercise, because it is that point, it was walking, now something else. But my kids will be like, "Mom, I think you need to go downstairs. I'll take care of whatever it is." And they know it and I know it. And it's like, okay, I'm going over the edge and things aren't good. And they're okay saying it. I think the other thing that is interesting in our house is that I really like my job. I am not the more financially successful partner in my household. And it's interesting because I hear my kids now make comments about, I will say, I'm working today, but I'm happy about that, whatever. And they say, "Yeah, that's so different," because I don't hear many people say that they like their jobs. And that's another time when you can say, well, so that's a different kind of definition of success, right? Enjoying what you're doing versus doing it for the means to the end.
All right. Do we have any other questions before we round out today's session? Thank you both so much for coming today and sharing. I will say, as kids, we struggle, to see our kids find their people. It's hard as parents as well to find our people. So please know that, whether it be on the Bears Den or offline, your people are out there, your parents are out there, make those connections. There's other parents that are feeling the same things as you are. So, feel free to reach out to me. Maybe we can make like a little parents pod, as an offshoot of the Bears Den, so we can all share things that work well and things that aren't working well, and how can we improve. But you definitely have a family with the Cambridge Bears, and I think there's a lot of support here. So I hope you all feel that, and perhaps we can have another session in the spring similar to this, to talk again about how we're feeling and how our kids are feeling. But thank you both, Jessica and Jeannine, for coming today. This was a really great session, and I appreciate everything that you shared with us today.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much, Leanne.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. We will have a session in November. In December, we'll take a little break and we'll wrap back up in the new year. 2022 has got to be a better year for everyone, hopefully. But thank you so much for coming today, and I hope you have a great weekend and enjoy the rest of the day.